Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. Today I want to give an update on 3 separate trees in my collection, and I want to focus talking a little bit about their health. So this is specifically 3 trees that have gone through a little bit of a rough patch, that had some health problems, and that are, in my opinion, now in a recovery phase or already beyond that, and are again somewhat stable. So I want to show those 3 trees, talk about their specific health problems and how they're doing right now, but I also want to give you some general learnings that we can take away from problems that might also appear on your trees and how to best act when that happens. So I would start right away with this Ficus ginseng here. It is a grafted variety, so we have Ficus microcarpa here grafted onto a rootstock that normally has bigger leaves. We will, spoiler alert, see later one where we don't have anything grafted and we have the natural leaves. But this one went through a little bit of a problem. So unfortunately, a couple of weeks ago when I fertilized this tree, I didn't dilute the liquid fertilizer enough, and I think I somewhat burned the roots on this tree. It is still in a clay and organic soil mixture, so it really adheres here, the liquid fertilizer. And when the tree started to lose leaves, I was quite certain that that is the problem. The first thing I did right away is to flush the soil to get out any of the excess minerals, to get simply the soil in order again for the roots to thrive and for the tree to thrive. And after a couple of weeks where it really dropped a lot of leaves around it, so you could really see how it goes around the tree losing leaves, it has stabilized and now it is definitely in a recovery phase. A lot of new growth showing on all growth points in here. All tips are really green and are sporting some new growth. Here in the back even, so the side that was facing away from the window, we can see new growth. Luckily, none of the branches has died back, so it seems the tree really recovered just in time for no major issues on the branch that we have on this tree, which I'm very happy about because, of course, we always have a certain design in mind for our trees. If that suddenly would no longer be viable, that would be, of course, unfortunate simply due to a health problem. So I would say the learning for this tree that we can take away when it comes to the health is when you see a problem, act fast. As I said, I saw a problem. I went really into the root cause searching mode, I would say. Really, it could have at this point only be the case that it was the fertilizer. I checked the leaves, there was no signs of any pests. I didn't move it in any other area in my house, so it must have been the fertilizer that I did a couple of days before that. So I knew what the core problem probably was and how to act against that. And of course that can give you the necessary time for your tree to rebound when you can act fast and change the situation that actually leads to deteriorating health. So that definitely has been my takeaway from this tree. Let's move on to the second one and talk a little bit about that. So here we are with the second tree, definitely a smaller fellow, again also a Ficus ginseng, but as I already spoiled a little bit beforehand, this is not a grafted variety, so this is really the original foliage from the rootstock. You can often spot the difference right away. Either normally you can see the graft because many of them are not really that well grafted, to be honest, especially the ones you can find in the usual garden centers and box stores. However, also on the shape of the leaves, you can often spot that the non-grafted ones are more elongated and they also have bigger leaves normally, because the reason we do graft other varieties onto this rootstock is because they're better fitting for bonsai. They're smaller leaves. Here you can already see the newer leaves are already starting to get double the size of the lower leaves here on the branches, and those would still double in size if we let it grow. There is ways we can counteract that, for example by defoliating or partially defoliating, but that is a topic for a different video. Here we talk about the health. This one has also gone through some rough patches, I would say. I took out most of these branches you can see here at one point because I wanted to focus on maybe 3 to 4 branches that I wanted to develop then into a somewhat really nicely structured top of the tree. However, a couple of days after I took out most of these branches, all the leaves started to fall from the few branches that were left. And I think it was simply a shock reaction. I probably defoliated too much. You have to look at this tree as it is right now. I would say it was similar back then, and I took out 80 to 90% of all branches at that point. And I think that was simply too much for this tree to take. and it fired back tremendously by losing all the leaves that were still stuck before on these branches. And to be honest with you, at that point I really thought it is a lost cause when it comes to this tree. However, I did decide to continue to take care of it, and by taking care of it I mean when the soil dries out, you water it, you keep it in a spot where normally it would thrive, you check is there any pests on this tree that maybe have been a problem, and it did encounter some spider mites, so that might have also factored into it. And one of the learnings I can already give ahead, when you have already a problem on your tree and probably the spider mites were already on there when I worked on it, then you shouldn't work on your tree. Definitely the case. So if your tree is already somewhat in low health, if it is already somewhat weak, you should not unnecessarily stress it more. Of course, what do I mean with you shouldn't work on it? I mean, you shouldn't then go ahead like I did and prune. If you have, for example, a tree that is root bound and needs an emergency repot, you should of course go ahead and repot. So that is then work that is needed for your tree to improve in health. But anything that is unnecessary, you should really stay away from when your tree is already not doing that well. But luckily, somehow miraculously even, this rebounds. And probably a second learning for this tree, don't give up too early on your trees. They can come back from way worse things that you could probably imagine, or that you could probably think is the case. And it definitely was like this with this tree here. I really thought way too far gone, but however, even though no leaves left, after a couple of days I started to see again green tips on this couple of branches that are left on. And here we are now, I would say 2 to 3 months later, with a full tree again, branches full of foliage. So it's definitely never too late to still give it a try. So it could have been the case that I would have simply said, oh, there's no more leaves on this tree, it is probably gone already, and I give up on it. But as you see, if I would have done that, I would have missed out on still a nice tree with so much potential in it that we can work on in the future. So 2 learnings from this tree, I would say. Let's move on to our last tree and see what we can learn from that one. And here we are again with a tree I showed a couple of weeks ago when it was definitely doing worse than this still. It is still definitely in recovery. It has not fully bounced back like the tree we just saw beforehand. It is a Ficus benjamina, a variegated Ficus benjamina, and it is a fusion project. So I'm trying to fuse 3 trees together in here at the moment. The last time I worked on this, like really worked on this, I pruned it back, and probably a day afterwards, again, it started to drop leaves. And of course, dropping leaves normally is the first sign that there's something going on with your tree that you should pay attention to. And I must say, I didn't pay attention to it right away. I thought, okay, yeah, I just pruned it. It could be also the shock reaction simply to it, that it dropped some leaves. However, I think it was a combination of simply too many cuts at one point, it drying out too fast, and probably it dried out a little bit too much at that point, which stressed the tree even further, and then it dropped a lot of leaves. Here again, it probably goes back to the learning from the first tree. If I would have simply been faster with figuring out what the problem is, or that there is a problem in the beginning, that it is drying out faster than I would have anticipated, I probably would have saved this tree from a lot of stress and a lot of dropped foliage that it now has to regrow, and a lot of time that I need to wait now, of course, also until we can work on it, until it is healthy enough to grow further, to thicken, to also continue with fusing together in here. So yeah, it is a mistake that definitely sets me back a couple of months, I would say, on this tree. But of course, it's also learning, and the learning, as I said, is stay on top of your trees, keep an eye on them, especially after you worked on them. There is always a bit of a volatile time, I would say, after you worked on your trees, and it is best to really make sure to care for them extra well after you work on them, because it is a lot of stress on any tree when you rework on them, and if you catch it early enough, you will definitely save yourself a lot of headaches. But I would say a lot of learnings we can take away from these 3 trees. Hopefully there has been some nuggets in there that you can also take for your trees. Hopefully you can apply that and catch problems before it is too late, or before they develop to a point where the effect on the tree is bigger than would have been the case if we catch it earlier, or if we can even mitigate the problem right away by caring for it, as could have been the case with this tree. If you enjoyed this video, if you have any questions about the health of your trees, feel free to leave them in the comments. And if you enjoy my video, feel free to leave a like. If you enjoy my channel, feel free to subscribe to it. Hopefully you'll find other videos on my channel that can be of help or of good information to you. And I will see you in the next video. Until then, take care.